Watch very carefully. Look, listen, and learn. Things may not always be as they seem. You're a marked man, Al. Anything may happen at any time. In fact, your next podcast is just a few seconds away.
What's happening, Hellspawn? This is George Marston kicking off another episode of Spawnography. With me, as always, is
Peter Slyden. How's it going?
Oh, it's been a pretty good week. We got a new house that we're gonna move into soon. Been looking for that for a while, and so that's gonna be good. Couple months away, but we got it locked in now. It's a big thing off my plate. Pretty excited about that. How about you, buddy?
Oh, just keeping on.
Yeah.
Hockey's been ramping up. I coach children's roller hockey, so that's been ramping up. And I've had a fun week. I went to a Mets game and an Islanders game back to back.
Oh, that's great.
I got invited to an Islanders game by the team as part of a summit of other youth roller hockey and deck hockey organizations.
That's fun.
Got to network with folks and chat about the programming that we have, and the Islanders want to do something over the summer for next fall. So yeah, pretty cool. I mean, the Islanders is a team that I grew up rooting for. I still root for. So
that's great.
It's very cool to get to be their guest, and there was free food and drinks.
That's awesome.
Oh, and the Islanders won. So
hell yeah. I always I rarely followed hockey just because I never knew how when I was a kid, because I didn't have a dad. But I always loved the Bruins because I was born outside of Boston and I lived there when I was a kid. Yeah, whatever. But then I lived in Atlanta, and we had 3 or 4 different teams at different points. We had the Knights when I moved there, and then the Thrashers, and so there was, and we haven't had one for a little while. I think we're getting a new one. Someone's moving down from Canada soon. I can't remember.
I think so the Thrashers became the current Winnipeg Jets.
Right, that's what it was.
And I think there's some team, that might
end
up back by you.
Hockey talk. Hockey talk, as my uncles would say it. But anyway, that's great.
There is a Spawn as a hockey player, hockey card. Did you know that?
Oh, I didn't. That'd be cool to have.
Yeah. I'm going to try to track that down.
That's fun. I like
Listeners,
that.
If you want to send us some hockey cards of Spawn specifically, you can do that.
That'd be fun. Spawn hockey cards. If you want to send us Spawn shit, I mean, if it's cool enough.
Honestly, the thing I'll need most soon is just some issues, and one thing I'll say, shout out to the Spawn community online.
The Spawn
community.
No, it still doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. The Spawn community online has been really, really cool. r/Spawnsuniverse and r/Spawn on Reddit, and then there's a couple of Facebook groups that I post in. Really glad to have you guys listening.
Thanks so much.
And sharing your feelings about Spawn and some excitement for the show, which is really cool. We've gotten some messages just saying oh, it's cool you're doing the show. I wanted to do a show like this,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I can say,
yeah, go for it.
Is there's room for more Spawn podcasts. So there's also the Respawn podcast out there regarding Spawn. They're covering a lot more current stuff than we are. So if you're looking for another Spawn podcast, that's a great option.
And I think if Todd McFarlane has one mantra that he has tried to pass down through his comics, and I've heard him basically say this in person a few times, it's if you've got something to say, just get out there and say it. Get out there and do it. Create your thing and make it happen. And
100%.
Absolutely, I support it. So yeah, if there are I know there are several Spawn podcasts going, and they're all They're all pretty cool. And if you want to start one, go for it. We'd love to hear it.
Yep. All right, so we got
There's a legion of
Spawn.
hell spawns.
We're just building the forces of Malbolgia.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
So
We're gonna get into that in this 2-part episode.
We will. Todd is going to remind us the central concept of Spawn. We're going to get into 2 issues today. And the first one is Spawn number 25. That is called Tremors, written by Todd McFarlane, pencils by Marc Silvestri, inks by Bat and Billy Tan, copy editor and letters by Tom Warzakowski, colors by Brian Haberlin. Further computer colors credited to Brian Haberlin, Tyson Wengler, Ashby Manson, and Juan Carlos Rodriguez. Background assist by Nathan Cabrera. Film output by In Color. Production Dennis Heisler. Production assistant Peter Steigerwald. And Big Gun David Wohl, which
Wow.
I don't really know what that means. But
Big Gun David Wohl, you know? Someone's got to carry the big iron on their hip, I guess.
This one is dedicated to the spirit of independence.
How about that?
So,
a shared spirit between the 2 neighboring countries of Canada and the United States, I'm sure.
We'll forget about that whole War of 1812 thing.
What even was that? So, okay, these
that's
2...
when we tried to invade Canada.
No, well, I was trying to forget it, Pierce.
Oh,
look what
fair.
you did. You brought it right back to the surface now. all our Canadian listeners are
there are
sore,
4 of them,
and we're sorry to them for bringing up the War of 1812.
Get on with it,
eh? Yeah. Wow. All right. So, well, as of this episode, I'm officially halfway through Spawn Compendium number 1. So how about that? I have the second one on my shelf already. I guess I'm going to have to be investing in the third one sooner than I thought. And we're also picking up some outside issues and stuff. Pierce is collecting their singles, and we're also I've been collecting some of the spin-offs and stuff like that. So anyway, that's neither here or there. I'm just rambling about collecting comics again. Yeah, Spawn number 25, drawn by Marc Silvestri, which, what a treat. First off,
what's your history of Silvestri? For me, it's X-Men.
Well, I have a pretty fun history of Silvestri. I'll tell a very brief anecdote. I'll try to keep it from rambling. When I was a kid, I first really saw Marc Silvestri's art on Wolverine with Larry Hama. And it was a 2-part issue. It was one of the ones, maybe the first one, where Sabretooth comes for Wolverine on his birthday, and they're in the sewer with LCD and Albert. So good.
Hell yeah.
A year or 2 ago, I got to interview Marc Silvestri about his Batman and the Joker series, and we talked a little bit about that comic with Larry Hama, and he had, of course, effusive praise for Hama. But yeah, very cool. And I've always been a fan of Silvestri. Of all the Image guys, I think he's maybe my favorite individual artist.
I think it's really interesting at the time that he and Jim Lee are on X-Men. Obviously, both of them are playing a little bit closer to house style, but they're 2 of the guys that really, I felt, picked up the ball from your Paul Smiths and your Dave Cockrams in terms of, like, they were giving characters like stuff to do in the background where they're like,
really engaging narrative storytelling,
twirling their hair or whatever, like in the background, not involved in any of the dialogue. So I felt like those comics had so much more depth, and it's weird because when Image starts, I do feel the shift that happens as I even feel the shift as we go into like Jim Lee's like X-Men number 1, where that stuff still exists in there, but the styles become a lot looser. It's a lot scratchier. The lines are a lot thinner. It seems like a lot more micron inking rather than, big swaths of black.
Built a little more for speed because, Jim Lee was doing a lot of the plotting around Chris Claremont there. I think that was a big conflict they had in those early X-Men spin-off issues.
But then with Silvestri, I also felt like once his Image stuff starts coming out, Cyberforce kind of lost me. Like it wasn't exciting to me as a kid. I was like, oh, it's scratchy. And I think one of the things that I've really loved about Todd's work is that that element is there on some level because that was this kind of style that these guys were doing, this like very frenetic, kinetic style that was popular at the time, obviously, and continues to be on some level. But Silvestri, I got an ash can of that Batman book with no colors, and I was like, this is unreadable.
It's interesting how it looks. Like it's all just.
There's so many lines. There's like so much going on, you know.
I think I interviewed him about the re-release of it without in just like the pencils or whatever. Which the thing is, I've always really enjoyed Marc Silvestri's pencils. Weirdly enough, I'll agree with you that big portions of that, especially in just pencil, were kind of blotty. But there was an issue of New Avengers he did during Secret Invasion that I was like, oh, it's really nice to see Marc Silvestri on this. Actually,
it's really nice to see him here.
Yeah, exactly what I was about to say. 100%. He nails it. I think he gets what Spawn's about. I think he enjoys drawing just a guy, one character here, maybe instead of a team for a month, because this is, as you were telling me, the month that a lot of the Image creators swapped books.
Yeah, so this is a month where I forget what they call it. I think they call it like Image X or something like that. But all of the creators like swapped onto different books. So Todd, there's a little ad in the back of this issue that's like, "Hey, where was Todd this month?" And it says, "Oh, you can read him over in Cyberforce number 10." Which again, we've talked about this before, but the fact that Cyberforce is only on number 10, I know it's like a slightly later release than Spawn was. It wasn't like a launch title, I don't
think so.
I'm getting the timeline correct. But Spawn is cooking with gas at this point. Also, the issues have come out of order, and that's about to be resolved. We're almost past that.
And we learned from that, that's part of why there's so many issues out now, why we're on issue 25 of Spawn already, is because Todd McFarlane will put out what he has, and he will find ways to put it out. That is the side of business, Todd, that works really well, is him saying, okay, we need product. We're going to make a fucking product and get it out there. The side of business, Todd, that doesn't work so well is the other side, which is kind of funny because it's the two sides of the Spawn coin, the same way that issues 25 and 26 that we're going to talk about today are also two sides of the Spawn coin. Spawn 25 is a fun little yarn that is just a Spawn story. Just like that might be a Spider-Man story or, something like that. It's just an issue of Spawn. And it's fun and it's cool to read. And then issue 26 is, as we'll get into then, a deeply like mythological, text-heavy, long remembrance of everything that's ever happened in 25 issues of Spawn.
Yeah, it's a little bit of like a, hey, have you never read a Spawn issue? You can just read this one and jump back in and you'll be pretty good to go moving forward.
But before that, in 25, this is kind of what I think Todd McFarlane would like a prototypical issue of Spawn to be, which is Spawn having some questions and some answers and meeting a cool guy and doing a cool thing with that guy.
And handing off some files.
Yeah, there's files.
It's serious if there are files. This is a direct follow-up to The Hunt. In The Hunt, Spawn sort of stakes his claim on the alley, right?
Makes his presence known to the world, yeah.
Yeah, so everybody's now pretty aware of the idea of Spawn. It's a name that he rejected, but now he embraces. And, the denizens of the alley are happy to have him. So we open this issue with our good old friends, the Talking Heads.
Right.
It's, again, great to see queer representation in Spawn comics.
And so the thing about what you just said is he's also made himself known to the world here, in as much as everyone knows everything about what happened in the alley, in the Hunt, which is, it culminated with the FBI, the CIA, the Mafia, the New York City Police Department, and Spawn all convening in the alley, basically all looking for answers about who killed all these mob bosses, what Spawn's real deal is and how it all connects.
And also what Terry Fitzgerald's deal is.
Yeah, and
And
all
then
thinking Terry
Overkill is
Fitzgerald
there.
is the answer. And Overkill is there too. That's right.
Yeah.
He's there on behalf of the mafia.
Yeah.
On behalf of La Cosa Nostra. Look, so
on behalf of Stregonona.
Stregonona. Look, the Stregonona. I love Stregonona. If I grow up to be a Stregonona with a magic spaghetti pot that keeps going forever, life will be fine. That'll be fine. That's how I would use my Spawn powers. I'd be Grandma Spawn.
You just make spaghetti.
Or noodles of any kind. Pasta dishes. Could be a baked ziti. A stuffed pasta. You get the idea. What I would do with my Spawn powers as Grandma Spawn. With a big pasta pot. Yeah. Spasta.
This bit is too long. We have to stop trying to combine Spawn with other words. It doesn't work.
Well, but it is a portmanteau. It's Hellspawn.
It's kind of a nickname because it's short. Spawn is short for Hellspawn.
Right. Well, I meant Hellspawn. Yeah. Look.
Semantics.
Anyway, the three talking heads here know all about all the intricacies of all the people who are involved in the violent conflagration, to the point where the CNN reporter is just reporting it straight on, including that police are now talking about Spawn and believe that he was linked to the vigilante murders of the crime lords that were actually committed by Violator. And then there's the E! Entertainment guy, again, queer representation, we love to see it, basically saying it's all for ratings, kind of weirdly connecting it to the reporting on it, to a search for ratings in the media.
Now that I've done his voice, I now only read it in the voice that I did. And it's just very funny. What do you get when you mix cyborg warriors, the FBI, the CIA, and the cops, plus a magical vigilante fighting all over town? Double-digit Nielsen's. And they dismiss my channel as lowbrow infotainment. I love it.
Snagglepuss.
Yeah. I don't know why that's his voice, but it is.
I like it. Exit, stage left. Heavens to... My grandfather used to go, heavens to Murgatroyd. All the time. And then we've got Viacom 6, which I think is a channel. Viacom's a thing. He is now praising Spawn, saying Spawn's the guy that they've been waiting for because he is taking on both the government and the crime lords. He says, we've needed someone to stand up and clear out our city of all the smug, self-interested filth. Mix equal doses of mob bashing and government smashing, and you got my kind of hero. So Spawn, whoever you are, whatever you are, if you can hear this, I'm with you, buddy, all the way.
Listen, somebody needs to drain the swamp.
That's right. So we cut to the alley guys, and I really love the narration here as it introduces them in the dark recesses of the sprawling city of New York, specifically the Bowery. The night people tend to their rituals. Actually, you could almost read it in like an Anthony Bourdain voice.
You could also read it in a Snagglepuss voice.
In the dark recesses, the night people tend to their rituals. And it just goes on from there. The tagging identifies their resident messiah, Spawn.
Cool.
And they're talking about one of Todd's favorite things and yours,
baseball.
The game of baseball.
Love baseball. Let's go Yankees.
Yeah.
One of them's got to pee. He gets menaced by another guy in the alley.
He doesn't really say who he's from. He just says his boss wants Spawn to move back 18 blocks or something like that. And he threatens the guy with a razor blade.
Right. Meanwhile, Terry Fitzgerald is at the office, his second day back since the events of the hunt. And he's out of sorts because of what has been going on.
Basically, he was framed to both the mafia and the FBI.
Right.
Everybody basically believed or was framing him to make it look like he was the one stealing all of everybody's files, which was actually Spawn. Spawn was going around lifting all these important files, getting dirt on everybody.
They simultaneously thought he was Spawn and thought he was Violator.
There's a lot of stuff getting put on
dealing with a lot.
Shoulders. Yeah.
Wanda shows up and he asks what she's doing there, and she says what she should have done a long time ago. which I guess is show up to his job and get a job there. Like,
Well,
she
she's
doesn't specifically
saying,
get a job. She's trying to like learn about his job
yeah, she's just
because
saying, I know you're a spy, but now I want to know more about the spy stuff, honey.
I
Which,
don't know if
like,
is that allowed when you're a spy? Do you have like
I was gonna say, I think that's one of the biggest warning signs. Like, is if your spouse is like, hey, honey, I'm finally ready to hear about your spy secrets. Like, I think that's usually is like, I watched all the seasons of The Americans, and I think they would usually be like, huh, like slowly reaching for the gun. One thing I do like about everything so far is Marc Silvestri's art on the 2 pages with the denizens of the night people.
we can just keep calling them the Night People. I think
The
that's
Night People. I like it. Spawn and the Night People. Great band name. I really like that Marc Silvestri picks up the baton from Todd McFarlane of focusing in on the facial expressions, really putting a lot of character in the people.
Mm-hmm.
It makes this feel right at home as a Spawn comic. What is different on these pages is the colors. And of course, this is Brian Haberlin, and I think there were some others credited.
Yeah, a bunch of computer coloring assistants, basically, who
But
are working on also different aspects of it too, right? Some are only working on backgrounds, some are only working on certain things. So
yeah,
I don't love the colors.
they are very mid 90s. So by the mid 90s, when computer coloring was really getting popular, pretty much every comic was moving on from any kind of like flat watercolor or, printed color inks like that. They're moving on from 4-color to computer coloring, which is very saturated, lot of gradients that were like a lot more difficult to do or didn't look the same in hand done inked colors. These, it works in places better than others. It does ground this in a very specific place and time for me, which like I could tell you like this is 94, 95, and it is
Yeah.
exactly that.
It's weird too because I think that there are places where the colors are excellent. That first page with Terry, the panel with him and the window and the computer, such a great panel.
Where it's a little more laid back.
The panel of his side profile, even with that kind of weird gradient in the back, it kind of works, and it looks really cool. The colors on his face aren't too over rendered. The light isn't kind of too overdone. I don't even mind the very last panel where they kind of blur the background,
Right.
to give it that more of like a cinematic feel.
We were experimenting with that a lot in this time period.
Yeah, the worst part about it is he had a bottle of or no, sorry, he had a coffee mug and he drops it, and there's like a million light sources going on like
Yeah.
on the mug and on the coffee on the
Yeah.
ground, and it's
It
like
is
it's
a
just too
lot
much.
there are a lot of little light flares and
It's way too much.
yeah.
It's doing way too much.
Yeah, but the mood on these pages is a little consistent. The other pages too, but it's a little more all over the place with the reds and the blues. Like for some reason there's a blue wash over everything, even though the lighting is the orange of the fire. And there's a
Yeah.
contrast there that I think they're trying to get at the shadows of the alley when you get away from the fire, but it doesn't quite work as well as you want it to with the interplay between the clash of the hots and the cold colors right next to each other. Some places it looks good, like the guy's close up face of the guy, panel of the guy's face, that you really get what they're going for, but there are others where it doesn't.
Yeah, and I can see the colorists also saying like, oh, we're gonna transition elements of the story, like this page turn reveal essentially of the of his bottle cracking, and then we turn to Terry's coffee cracking. So they use some purple in the backgrounds there.
Yeah.
There are a lot of colors because they had access to them, and it's one of those times where I'm like, man, what would this book look like if they were limited to older color palettes?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what that would bring out in the art. There was that exercise where somebody was recoloring Frank Miller,
Oh, very
which,
controversial, but
yeah, I'm not going to get into that aspect of it, but it was very interesting to see it with a different treatment.
Right.
Computer coloring is not always
Yeah.
just because there's technology for it. It's not necessarily always the best choice.
I think they gave it a more kind of graphic treatment where it was a little more conceptual and not as straightforward, like realistic. I do like the next 2 pages where we see the thug who was threatening the guy in Spawn's alley. He goes back to his boss, who we're seeing for the first time, is this character Tremor. And
Yeah.
I think we saw him once before somewhere, and his name was...
We've never seen him before.
Okay.
But he was referenced
That's right.
in like he's been drawn before, but his name was Blood.
That's right. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
And because Blood is under the purview of all Rob Liefeld characters, Todd made a joke and said, yeah, I changed his name.
Yeah. But I really like the design of Tremor here. He does kind of look like a Todd McFarlane demon, which will be a plot point in the story coming up where Spawn thinks he's a demon when they meet. But I kind of like the clash of red and blue colors here with his purple skin a little more than I liked it before. I like the panel of his glowing eyes. This looks like very prototypical 90s Marc Silvestri pages to me right here.
Yeah.
Like, for all, whether you love it or hate it, or I guess are indifferent to it, as you probably could be for Marc Silvestri, this is a lot of what his art was looking like in Cyberforce and elsewhere, and it's nice to see it in Spawn. It's cool to change of face.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just think it's a cool looking design.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty simplistic. Again, it has that McFarlane demony horns and like underbite kind of thing.
We end up not knowing a lot about Tremor right off the bat, but he's mad. We meet David. We learn the name of the thug from earlier. His name is David Brewy. I looked it up. That is not a hockey player. And seemingly, though, this guy's just been... There have been 24 issues of Spawn before this. This guy's just been hanging out.
I think the thing about that is that a lot of those issues are spent retreading ground, having fill-ins, doing the Coco Swiss, and having all these other writers come in. And I think a lot of that really derailed a lot of what Todd was really going to do with the story of Spawn. I think a lot of it changed the order of some things he wanted to do. And so I think that's why now at issue 25, it feels like we're what might be issue 12 or something if you didn't have like all of those side tracks already.
Yeah. I'm happy to meet another Spawn villain that is, or seemingly Spawn villain.
Right.
That is not just a giant robot guy or a mob boss.
Right.
Or Violator. And at this point, Violator will have gotten his powers back.
Yeah.
So we'll catch up with him soon.
But yeah, it is cool. And I like his purple skin. He was a cool looking action figure, as I recall. He has that extending arm. But we learn that he has a grudge against Vito Dracula Gravano, a.k.a. Tony Twistelli.
Yep. And I love the next page of his like not overt kill, not Spawn, not God. Nothing's going to save Twist. Super cool. There's a little hint about his arm.
Mm-hmm.
Something going on with his arm that we're not quite aware of.
Sick drawing.
Yeah, it rules. And also going to shout out the king, Tom Warzikowski again. Always just killing it on letters. I love that Tremor gets his own word balloons.
Yeah.
I love the emphasis that Orzakowski is able to bring out, and he's really able to bring out voice and characters. Even the night people, when they are chatting, when they're drunk or whatever, and so like the weird sort of
off-kilter lettering,
off-kilter sort of swaying.
Yeah, he's a great fucking letterer, and it comes through. The letters all through this sequence with Tremor here are great. And that page and that little bit where he's like, not overkill, not Spawn, not God. That's awesome. Also fucking kick-ass is this next page of Spawn. Reveling in the garbage and the mist. The colors here look great. I want to say. Very.
I would have put a poster of this up.
Oh hell yeah, I love that. Just the palette really works to set the mood, and Silvestri is doing these big, jagged, dark blocks that are kind of Mike Mignola esque like shaping of the page to kind of really set a big, bold mood. There's an almost universal horror kind of feel to this page to me, which I think it works great for Spawn.
Totally.
Spawn has big dark man energy in at his best.
I would read Spawn Darkman in a second.
Hell yeah. Honestly,
that would be sick.
Sam Raimi should direct the new Spawn movie. That will never happen, but it would be incredible.
He should direct the new Spawn instead of Todd doing it himself.
Great. That's going to be great.
I think actually if Blumhouse gets some up and coming horror director to do it,
it'll probably kick ass.
It could really kick ass. And they give them like only $10 million.
The guys who did Talk to Me, that would be great because they were stunt guys who did like horror stunts. Anyway, this page is fucking great. And Silvestri nails the big, billowing, creepy, living cape. I do like his big trash throne too. It looks like this would be like Spawn's like new metal album cover.
Given that Spawn essentially does have a new metal album, you're 100% correct.
Right.
Hey Mondo, if you're listening, if you can, or whoever re-releases things now, if you ever re-release the Spawn album from the movie, which rules, please put some art on it.
Yeah.
Some new art on it.
And of course, Todd McFarlane also did the art for the seminal Korn album, Follow the Leader.
I can never forget.
No one can. It was a big thing all through my high school days. He's reveling in the trash and he's thinking about how he accepted the name out of necessity. Spawn.
This is one of the things that we keep talking about how slow Todd is, but thank fucking God that we're finally, all right. He's accepting the call.
After 25 issues of Spawn, Spawn's origin has finally been told. He is now fully Spawn. And that's really what it is. Like, we finally got through like the full origin and all the backstory. I kind of, honestly, if you really ask me what I think at this point, 25 issues in, as I was saying before, I think a lot of the stuff that came out during the Coco Swiss, all of that, I think Todd would have himself done all that later if he wasn't rushing to get like those writers in the fold as soon as possible and letting them kind of take the reins on a lot of that storytelling. I feel like a lot of that would have come after some of this, but we're finally here. Spawn, he's accepted the name out of necessity. His new title is, for the first time, public knowledge. And we're finally moving forward. He says instead of recapturing his past life, he's merely been avoiding it, looking to solve the unwanted situations that have followed him into the alleys. Now that's backfired. And he's brought harm to the people there, and he won't allow that again.
Yeah, Spawn is really trying to have his existence not really affect anybody around him. However, he's also a world famous government assassin, so he's always been affecting things on
it's
a larger
very
level.
Strange, and he will lament that later on, like the loss of that life in 26. It's always been a strange dichotomy for him where he was a celebrity assassin. It's hard to piece together exactly what the hell that really means for Al and for Spawn. But for now, we're learning that he is no longer interested in having his struggles with heaven and hell taken out on the people of the alley. And just as he's kind of getting to that, one of the night people comes to him and says, Al, you got to hear this. And he says, no, I don't. It's time you learn to solve your own problems. And they argue back and forth. Instead of listening to his pleas for help over Tremors' enforcer coming and telling them they have to move or there's going to be violence, Spawn rebuffs him and basically says, you can solve your own problems. I'm not going to do this for you anymore. Tell whoever it is I'm not interested.
Yeah, it does feel like his solution is not, well, I'm going to protect these people and hang around. His solution seems to more be like, well, I'm just gonna get out of here and they can deal with their own shit and I'll go deal with mine.
Yeah, and some of that will bleed over into 26 because this is a two-parter where Spawn is very much sort of apathetic Spawn.
Yeah.
Where he's kind of rejecting the idea of being a hero a little bit. And it's another round of spin the personality for Spawn. It seems like just about every story he has a different personality.
Yeah, like now he has this like weird, I don't want to, like, he just came off an arc where he's like, oh, I got to protect these people. This is Spawn's alley and
Yeah.
whatever. And
And he
then an
declared
issue
it.
later, yeah, he declares it. He makes it a big deal. An issue later, he's like, no, I shouldn't do that. The next issue after this, he's just going to be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So, which is how he was in the first arc. Todd's writing, I think I will say this. I think Todd's writing has gotten better overall.
I think so too. He is doing a lot better plotting these issues, and he is learning as he goes.
This is a better version of the overt kill arc.
Absolutely. And it's just following after that same arc. But again, and that's also another arc that's kind of just the same one again, like another overt kill. Yeah. Which, I like the repeating villains, but I'm glad to finally, as you said, get another rogue for the rogues gallery of Spawn villains and supporting characters.
100%. Speaking of supporting characters, we do check in with Sam and Twitch.
This is a fun page.
Yeah, it's very fun. I really like that Silvestri seems to be like leaning into Todd's style a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with Sam eating that sandwich.
And framing the panel with his mouth on one side and the sandwich he's taking a bite out of on the other.
Yeah, great.
That's a really fun panel. I mean, you can feel how you want and be right about the depiction of Sam just constantly eating. But as an artistic choice, it's very emblematic of who these characters are. And to be fair, in this, Twitch is also having lunch. He's just doing it very daintily, wiping his mouth with a handkerchief.
Reading these issues and then seeing, I just read the new issue of Sam and Twitch. New issue to when we're recording is issue 1 of Sam and Twitch Case Files, because this won't come out for quite a bit. But, whoo boy, Tom Orzechowski really failing that book on that one. There's no word balloons.
Oh.
So it's just text on Simon Kodransky art, and it is. Yeah, it's not great. But one of the weird things has been the evolution of Twitch as like a badass.
Yeah.
He gets like now he's like not just this like little skinny guy. He's a lot more intense looking. It's very funny.
Now that we know he can blow your brains out from like 500 yards away with a handgun. Fucking Sam singing his racist song here.
Yeah,
it's a throwback to a very bad Disney movie. The next page is very cool. We get a very cool Marc Silvestri Spawn lounging on a gargoyle with his cape going a billion directions, billowing like rags.
I love the close-up also. This is the weird era where we see a lot of hamburger head, shoelace face, Spawn.
Not much mask.
Not much mask. I love the mask. It looks cool when Silvestri draws it. I like that he draws it very tight to his face and kind of we can see all of his muscles and eyebrows and stuff.
Yeah, it looks good.
That stuff's good. And then, he must seize these moments, defend his beliefs, act like a man.
Yeah, he's looking down on the night people and deciding, okay, I've got to protect my territory.
Yeah.
Even though I don't want to fuck with these guys, I've got to go fuck with this guy.
The next stuff with Tremor rules.
Yes, this whole Tremor fight is great because somehow Spawn knows exactly where to find him and who the boss that they're talking about is.
And also has the time to create a decoy Spawn.
Spawn goes full Wile E. Coyote here and creates a cardboard cutout of himself that he Kevin McAllisters into the window of Tremor's office, like in Home Alone, where he's got all the dancing cutouts. And Tremor goes, and he throws his voice. He goes, "You wanted to talk?" So it sounds like it's coming out of the cardboard thing. And Tremor goes, "Not exactly." Grabs it and goes, "Plywood, crunch." And this panel of Tremor down at the bottom going, "Show yourself, coward." And so his face is all like splayed out and his neck is all gorged up.
Couple things. Did Spawn have like an arts and crafts day? 2, did one of the night people do it? 3, did he just like conjure it with his powers?
Was that
Probably
like a
the third one.
0.1% to create plywood? Oh, his costume can summon things. We learned that back when he made all the sweet berry wine.
Yeah.
For Cogliostro, or was that Cagliostro?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that's
theoretically,
right.
He could have just like conjured it.
Yeah, so he probably did.
Todd really covering all his bases, and he's like, "Yeah, don't worry, he can do this. It's fine."
The next page, though, where he's sending all his chains out at Tremor, and Tremor's like reacting with his arms up. Very fun Todd McFarlane-esque page from Marc Silvestri, where his hands are, kind of framing the action again. And Spawn's cloak looks cool as shit here. Marc Silvestri really does a kick-ass job with the like many folds and different, angles of the cape and all its many shapes.
It's like he had a bet with Todd that he could draw the cape bigger.
Yeah. And honestly, some of the way he draws it in this panel starts to get very influential later, with the collar getting even bigger and the shoulders getting even more pointy. Yeah. Like that will become a look for Spawn. And there's a Spawn action figure. I think it was the 3rd core Spawn.
It's also a bit of it feels like a bit of a reference to Todd's Batman.
Yeah, I could see it.
Very,
for sure.
That very specific, I want to say it's like a Batman Year 2 cover.
I think I know which one you're talking about.
Or a splash page.
Oh, yes. I know exactly which one you're talking about. Where his cape is just all shapes.
Yeah.
There's
and he's got huge, like, pointed shoulders.
Uh-huh. Which, again, also very Kelly Jones.
Yeah. Oh, great artist.
Who recursively was a big influence on Todd McFarlane's Batman in that Spawn Batman crossover issue.
This fight scene has one of my favorite panels in the entire thing, which is Spawn flipping upside down.
Yes.
It's so cool.
That's maybe my favorite panel in this whole issue. That is just so cool with the silhouetted Tremor and Spawn. Honestly, this art with these blocked, like heavy blacks is mind-boggling. How fucking cool it looks. It looks like a comic from
through.
It looks like a comic from 10 years ago, not 30 years ago.
It's insane.
It's really good. It's really good. And the coloring is great there.
It does also have that Mignola thing. And that's why I actually think that, and we see this when Silvestri did X-Men and even Wolverine, I think he works a little bit better with flatter colors, with no computer lighting effects, where you can really back up your blacks and block out your shapes. And this panel proves it.
Yes. And you know what it is that Silvestri's art, like many artists of the 90s, including Todd McFarlane at times, especially Jim Lee, who is maybe his closest like style mate in the Image stable, they do a lot of rendering on the page in their pencils and and through the inks that arise from those pencils, because I think most of the time they're having other people ink them. Definitely Jim Lee is. Like they're very rendered. That's why there's so much hatching and cross hatching and spotted blacks and big chunky patches. So when you start to get really rendered colors on top of that, it starts to look over rendered and it starts to clash, because you have so many different types of rendering trying to get at the same thing. Like this panel here, on the top of the page, where on the top of the like splash page, the one like panel of Tremor's eye is a great example of where it works really well, where they're doing minimal highlighting in the kind of flatter color there, allowing Marc Silvestri's hatching and his rendering to really speak for itself. The Tremor below that, I think, works less well, because they're trying to render so much of it in the colors alongside the inks and using like the mood lighting, the blue.
There's
mood
a lot
lighting.
going on.
It's a lot, and it starts to make it look less scary than it could be, especially when you look at that panel where it's a lot darker and the inks are a lot heavier, and it's almost like the details are the white areas, like they're kind of left blank. That is so effective with those flatter colors.
Oh, it's so cool. It's so exciting. That moment is so exciting at the bottom of that page.
Mm-hmm.
I would actually argue that they almost do it perfectly on the top panel.
Mm-hmm.
They let Tremor be in those blacks
Mm-hmm.
and in that shadow, and then they over-render Spawn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just for listeners that just like hounding the colorists on this. It's also that like the lettering is rendered. Like
Right.
there's like there's color on the lettering that's rendered and the sound effects, and so it's so busy. And I just really think that with flatter colors overall, I think I'm a fan of flatter colors in general.
So am I. But
But
for the time, I will say I like these colors a lot, especially for the era where we're getting into this style of coloring. These work better than you see it in a lot of other places.
I do think though that Steve Oliff and Olyoptics are able to strike a bit of a better balance.
Right.
However, I don't know that we get that bottom panel from them. I don't know that they're like, I think that it's more straight down the middle in terms of like, it's never going to be amazing, but it's never going to be completely offensive. It's just going to be what it needs to be. There's a couple places where I'm like, oh boy, what were they thinking? And then you get panels like this where I'm like, yes, give this to me.
It's the difference between where they're just using all the tools and where they're using the right tools.
Right. The next couple pages bear that out. Again, anytime that they're able to really back up those blacks and not let like random light sources or flare effects take over panels, things look great. But it'll be in like it'll be right next to a panel where they did everything
like
wrong.
This super over rendered panel of Spawn where he's got red lighting his face and all this other stuff, and they're just throwing in light sources for fun. His cape looks like flames in this one page, which is kind of a cool effect, but I really like the Tremor where it's just you can see just his horns and his like smile.
Yeah.
It very reminiscent of when you see Spawn's face in silhouette.
Totally.
It looks very cool. They're fighting and arguing, and we're seeing Tremor's cybernetic arm in action, and it looks
it's reloading. It's reloading like Henry Cavill
in Mission Impossible. Henry Cavill, improv master, improvised that classic moment.
Listen, we know that he plays Warhammer. Maybe he's a big
Henry Cavill. If you want to come on the podcast, let's talk it out.
That'll work.
Let's have a chat. He's listening.
He's always listening. He's Superman.
Exactly.
He's got super hearing.
Exactly.
Oh, and I love Spawn's eyes here too. I even like the little twinkly nonsense that they add. That's obviously the computer colorist.
But that it's kind of a cool touch there with Spawn because he has that kind of twinkly power. Twinkly power. Wow. Twink Spawn. Release that action figure.
Spawn in a crop top
with denim shorts over his.
It's Hank Azaria. It's Hank Azaria in the Birdcage, but Spawn.
Oh boy! So they're arguing, and Spawn finally is like, "What is this about? Some personal vendetta? I don't care. You want Gravano? Fine, but what's with this turf war crap?" And he's basically like, "It's a diversion. Vito and his cartel are intrigued by you, Spawn. That kind of interest can get you killed. You call me a demon, I could only wish." And here we learn his origin is basically that he was a mafia super soldier, sort of like Overkill, who was given all kinds of microsurgeries, he says, and cybernetics, and dosed with who knows what sort of radiation and anti-rejection drugs, and they all transformed him into this being that looks almost like one of the demons.
It's like he's like a demon Hulk.
Yeah.
Kind of is his deal.
For a 90s version of that character, this design is pretty tasteful.
It's really good.
It works great.
It works for the world of the story. I love the panel where this gets explained, where the explanation panels are splitting their faces.
Mm-hmm. Great looking page. And the colors work out here well too, because they're very moody and they're rendered, but it works well because they're not there's not an extremely broad palette in every panel.
Also some good little bits of Kirby crackle. And I like the sort of werewolfy panel at the bottom.
The Animorph transformation. Yeah, that's great. Boy. Yes, the very bottom panel where he's silhouetted against the moon. That's great.
So cool.
And I do like the very Animorph style, like transformation panel above that. Honestly, it's a great sequence. Very effective and cool page.
So this is where I was saying I think Todd's getting a little bit better.
Yes.
Tells us everything we need to know in a page.
And the dialogue through which it's told is pretty good.
Yeah. And we're doing a classic superhero thing. Two guys fight until they maybe understand that they have a common enemy, you know?
We learn that Vito Gravano slaughtered Tremors' family to cover his tracks after transforming him into a terrible mutant. And Spawn is very taken by this because it's not that dissimilar from what happened to him. He made a bad deal that took everything from him, and he wants revenge on someone who has power over him, just like Spawn with Malbolgia. It's a pretty, actually, kind of elegant and fun bit of superhero storytelling.
Good stuff.
Because also, Todd, smartly, thankfully, in the script, doesn't bash that over our heads.
Yeah.
He draws the parallel, but he doesn't have Spawn be like, that's too much like my story, bud. You're going to have to sit down and listen to this and do 2 pages of Spawn's origin, too. It's very effective. And also, this page looks great. I love the bats rising up against the moon on the one side. I love Spawn and Tremor facing off in the shadows here. Here is another panel where the very dark, heavy, blocked shadows really work to shape that encounter and the mood of it way better than if that was just like a blue haze.
Absolutely. Now that he's found a seemingly an ally, Spawn has some files.
The most important currency in Spawn's universe is files.
The arm that Silvestri draws on Spawn is absolutely insane.
That forearm, he's been using his shake weights, dude.
It's the most 90s arm I've ever seen.
It really is.
So big. It's bigger than it's twice the size of his head.
His torso looks small compared to it. Like that is that looks like if you ever had action figures as a kid and you took like their arms off and put on like the different arms from the different, like it looks like a different action figure's arm. At the same time, it is a kick-ass drawing of Spawn.
Very cool.
I love
it. That's the coolest way you could draw somebody handing somebody else some manila
with
folders.
A big, massive, like here's my files arm. My arm's heavy. My arm's strong from carrying these heavy files all day.
Yeah, and then so Tremor jumps away, and
it's the files that he got in the previous arc that he used to blackmail Vito Gravano from Joe Sakic,
who is an NHL player, who maybe never knows about this.
Joe Sakic,
and that's why he never
come on the show.
That would be cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
I love the final panel of Spawn. I wish that's how the whole book was colored.
Yeah. It looks pretty good. And I love the panel of Tremor jumping away. Honestly, Marc Silvestri draws Tremor so fun. Like his little weird toothy grin and his horns. And
I will say Silvestri and Jason Aaron on Incredible Hulk
that was pretty cool. Looked
pretty
good.
Fun.
Another example where I was like, man, I really like Silvestri.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hulk Sharks.
And this is the end of the issue. Spawn gives over the files that he used to blackmail Vito Gravano to keep him out of the alley.
And he seemingly has an ally now.
Yeah.
Sort of.
He's made friends because he's basically given Tremor his blessing to go fuck up Vito Gravano's life using these files and everything else. And Tremor's like, sick. All right. Cool. No guff from me, Chet.
Which is also what Sam and Twitch did.
Yeah.
Pretty much. They were like, cool. Cool files on the chief.
Yeah. Cool files. All right, great. So we're going to jump into issue 26 here. This is going to be a very different issue. Pierce is going to read the credits in 1 second. This is the other side of the coin of what Spawn often is. Issue 25 to me was a really fun, cool comic that was great to read, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of the time, we get very literary and deep and analytical in some ways on what we're reading, and I think that's good. But I also think, especially when it comes to Todd McFarlane, he's making comics. He's not writing fucking Hamlet. And this is a comic that feels great to read.
A very fun thing that I read in an interview that he did with Gary Groff from Fantagraphics years ago that he did in Comics Journal. was right when Spawn number, like the first 9-10 issues that come out of Spawn. And Todd was like, Gary was kind of pressing him like, well, what do you read? And Todd's like, no, I don't read. I don't have time for that. And Gary's like, you don't read anything. Like, you don't read comics, you don't read books. He's like, no, I don't read. And Gary really presses him on this and is like, then how can, like, you get kind of called out for not being a good writer if you don't read. That's probably why. And he goes, listen, Gary, what if I read Shakespeare and become a better writer? And like Gary Graff's like, I mean, when you put it like that, like I guess not. But
what a fucking jock. I bet he doesn't eat vegetables either.
but it is what you're saying. Like, he's just in the business of making great comics, or making fun comics, or making comics that people want to buy. Is like we're kind of like downgrading it every single time,
but
right?
I mean, my point is, though, when we review it from like a strong literary standpoint, maybe it doesn't stand the test of time as like one of the great poetic comic issues.
Yeah, it's not From Hell or
it's
anything.
It's not fucking This Man, This Monster, you know.
Yeah.
But it is a great issue of Spawn, and it was cool to read and fun to look at, and I really enjoyed talking about it too.
Yeah, new character, new kind of status quo for Spawn for the first time.
Yeah, and
in a way,
he's moving on from some of what we've seen before. He actually did have a little moment of closure in the previous arc when he said his goodbyes to Wanda outside her window, and their relationship and their interactions aren't done, but he had a bit of an evolution in his personality and his feelings.
he's a little bit less singularly focused. He's understanding that he's like got to interact with the larger world, and a character like Tremor does force him to do that, even while Tremor does relate back to, Vito Gravano.
Right. But at least we've also moved on from that first chunk of like that jumble of like Violator, Terry Fitzgerald, Spawn, Vito, all that shit, you know?
Yeah, I will say that, and we're gonna get a lot of Malbolgia in this next issue, but having Violator kind of gone for a while has helped the book kind of open up.
Yeah, for sure.
As much as I like Violator and I like Clown,
Yeah.
there's something about Clown that does sort of ground Spawn, and this, he kind of keeps him in the cycle because that's a little bit of his job,
Right.
is to just kind of keep hammering away at him. And we haven't seen the larger plot of Heaven and Hell moving forward in a big way at this point. So to have him, it was a good idea to take away his powers.
Yeah.
Although, again, he has them back at this point.
Right.
We just haven't seen him again.
And we will get into some Heaven and Hell right now in Spawn number 26.
So this is Spawn number 26. It's called The Dark. Story by Todd McFarlane. Art by Todd McFarlane and Greg Capullo. Copy editor and letters, Tom Warzakowski. Colors by Steve Oliff and Olyoptics. Olyoptics is Tracy Anderson, Stacey Cox, Patty Stratton Jordan, Kirk Mobert, Marie St. Clair, Mo Sampson, Quinn Suplee, Christ Wolf, still the best name in comics, Breck Blackford, Candace McCasland, Robin Robertson, Leah Rude, and William Zindel. This issue dedicated to Dave Sim.
Very interesting because it's written by Karl Marx. Like, this opening thing feels like it's fucking definitely the start of a chapter in Das Kapital. It feels like it's a long monologue, and I like Capullo's rendering of it's 3 panels, long tall panels of New York City looking grungy, bats flying everywhere. We know this is the dark side of the city, and it's a long monologue about how money is the root of all evil, and what money really measures is power. And if you do not have enough evil in your heart and power in your wallet, then you are not able to succeed in a society that prioritizes those things over human needs. Once again, base Todd.
So, question for you. What do we think the art breakdown is on this?
Meaning,
do we think it's Capullo pencils with McFarlane inks?
Or McFarlane inks with Capullo pencils? Or the other way around, I mean?
Yeah. Do you think, because I kind of think that it's McFarlane breakdowns and inks or
Capullo
something.
pencils.
I don't know.
There is a Toddness about it.
There's a very Toddness about it, especially in some of the character designs that
Yeah,
feels very specifically Todd to me. And considering that we know that during the hunt, Capullo was kind of helping out, he would get a special thanks here or whatever. This issue read to me like a Todd issue, a Todd drawn issue. We don't talk about the covers very much. I love
right.
this cover.
Which one is it? The funny thing is,
This one.
yes. The funny thing is there are no covers in the compendium, so I have to look them up.
The
sometimes I don't have them
Origin
in front of me.
editions have the covers.
Mm,
However,
gotcha.
the Origin editions, and somebody I'm sure will tell me that I'm wrong, but the Origin editions do not have issues 9 and 10 because there's a lot of agreements about how those get reprinted,
Right,
and the compendiums have them
right,
despite that,
right.
which is why the compendiums are very good. And it's sick that you can get like 50 issues for $50.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. So I think that these are Todd, like either breakdowns with Capullo finishes or they're Todd pencils with Capullo inking some of it. I think this is still Todd trying to mostly get all the art done himself.
I could see it being Todd layouts and Capullo pencils and Todd inks. I could see it being, the thing is, I don't know if I've seen a lot of Capullo inking at all is the thing. So I don't know if he did a lot of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear when he gets like specially thanked.
Right.
And Todd has kind of talked about in the letters columns, like, oh, we all passed around a bunch of pages. Like, this is the wild, wild west of inking territory, I think, where like we've probably read issues that are inked by like Eric Larson, Jim Lee, Will Sportasio,
without
and Rob
knowing
Liefeld.
that they had pages in there that were inked by them.
Yeah.
And there are probably pages of their books that are the same way.
Exactly. No, 100%.
It's some mix of Todd McFarlane and Greg Capullo. And there is some Greg Capullo in these characters too, especially in a lot of the caricature of the faces. We're back to Olyoptics and Steve Oliff here. And I think the difference is kind of noticeable.
Yeah. When you see them right next to each other.
There are times when it's really remarkable. Now, this is a comic I think I had as a kid because I've definitely read it. And a lot of the art in it just brought back so many sense memories to me. This is, you can see why after this issue in particular, Todd was like, all right, Greg Capullo is going to be my guy for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because
100%.
There's a great synergy in the art.
This is an issue that seems to be the other thing that Todd tends to do, which is why Neil Gaiman was a good tap for the Coco Swiss.
The Coco Swiss.
Which is, this one kind of plays out like a parable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we meet Fred Barnett, and he doesn't have enough money. He doesn't have enough evil. His daughter is being taken away from him by the state because he is not able to make enough money to have suitable living conditions to take care of a child.
They live in this roach-infested apartment. He's arguing with his lawyer on the phone about the fact that it's not fair. The next page is him in front of the judge, and I really love this page.
Yeah,
this is a heartbreaking page. Honestly,
really
this is going to become a heartbreaking issue as we go.
Yeah.
It's also jam-packed with a lot of mythos. This is an issue that is really just a catch-up on Spawn to this point. But I love this page because we have the lower set panel of Mr. Barnett, Fred, was that his name? Fred Barnett, looking up at the judge, and she's in the higher set panel. Both of their faces look really good. The judge in particular, her face just has so much personality and character.
She looks just like a woman I worked with at the museum.
That's great.
It's real weird.
That's fun. And then the final, like the back set main panel that takes up most of the page is just this silhouette of the judge 10 feet tall on her podium. And Fred Barnett looking dejected and defeated against the big silhouette of this window. And when you look at the silhouette, the shape of the silhouette with the panels of the window, it's a little bit of dark foreshadowing of where this issue is going to go.
Yeah.
because Fred Barnett has lost hope.
Yeah.
And it's because, as the narration enforces again, he doesn't have enough evil. What is evil? We're going to talk about it right now with Malbolgia.
I have a second thought about the art breakdown.
Go ahead.
Did Greg do all the Malbolgia pages?
He maybe did. They
And
look
then
very
Todd did the
Malbolgic.
rest of it.
That's very possible.
I think that might track a little bit more. And I say it mostly, and this will sound so weird, because of the little skull at the top. I don't know why.
The skulls at the top and the bottom that frame
Yeah,
that page.
I don't know why they feel real Greg Capullo to me.
I could see it. That's very possible.
Yeah.
It's also possible, anyway, we meet up with the Malbolgia. We get a recap here of the Malbolgia's goal, which is to take on the armies of heaven by building an army of Hellspawn and their victims. Hellspawn are Malbolgia's lieutenants. They are sent to Earth to learn to be warriors with all the powers of hell, where they are also tasked with using their abilities to kill sinners, to send them to hell, to strengthen the armies of Malbolgia. Malbolgia is not the devil, but he is one of many devils. And one thing that I think is very cool on this, I think it's on this page, somewhere in here, yes, it's on this page, where it says that Hellspawn who are recruited like Alcimon are sent back to their home planets. So there are multiple planets with spawns on them. There are also multiple planets bound to this cosmology.
Yeah.
Bro, I would read a fucking Alien Spawn crossover. Did they ever do Spawn Alien? That would rip shit. That would be fuck yeah.
What if
Spawn
a
Predator?
I was just gonna say, what if a Predator got a Spawn suit?
Fucking
Kinda would be cool.
And he was just sent out to hunt sinners. Todd,
Specifically Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Call us.
Marvel's got that license, both of those licenses right now.
Todd, bring out the wallet, buy it. Or let's mend some fences. We can make this happen. Anyway,
I love the next page. We saw the close up on a fly during the hunt.
Yes.
And I love this slow zoom out on a spider.
Close up on a spider.
And I love the colors here. I really do. We were talking about coloring a lot this episode, but
we are.
I love the colors here. I love that Steve Oliff and Olyoptics are using the eye being so green to really, and then his finger being red. It just works really, really, really well.
The colors
Looks
are a
really
little
cool.
flatter. If they were super warm and saturated and over rendered like the previous issue, which again, not to harp on it, it looks, when you really look at it, it doesn't look that bad.
No.
But in comparison, this is a more interestingly rendered page. I agree.
I think it's also a very interesting. The evolution of McFarlane's storytelling is really interesting. I think, we were saying like he doesn't read, but I do think he watches a lot of movies.
I think he probably does. And I mean, to say you don't read when you're into comics is not always true, because he's probably looking at a lot of comics.
Yeah, especially his own.
And other ones being made by people around him.
Yeah.
It's not that he's nowhere near comics.
I think that was just the edgy thing for him to say in 1992.
Nah, I don't read. I don't read no books.
Especially to the Comics Journal.
Yeah, exactly.
and the publisher of Fantagraphics. Like
all right, smartass. You think Shakespeare will make me a better writer? Only if you want to learn an iambic pentameter. Do you think there's any significance to Spawn looking at a fly where Sam and Twitch were in that close up on the spider? Do you think there's any like spider and fly significance to that, or is it just the way it worked out?
I think it's an accident.
Yeah.
I think that it's, I did this before with the fly on the donut, so I'm going to do this with the spider on Spawns.
So I want to draw
but I
spider.
do, although, you know what, if we're going to overanalyze it, right, and that's the whole point of having a podcast, I mean, it is Spawn becoming a little bit more in control. He is in a lot more control than he has been in those early arcs. He gave the file to Sam and Twitch. He gave the file to Tremor now.
Files everywhere.
Yeah, so many files. He saved Terry Fitzgerald. He is known to the world in a way that he wasn't before.
Yeah.
And Cagliostro is about to make his appearance again to further explain Spawn's role in all of this. And so I do think that, like, I don't really think it's like a spider and a fly, cat and mouse thing with Sam and Twitch, although they probably feel like it is in the opposite direction.
Maybe so, yeah.
You know, I think they're still kind of trying to catch him.
I
a little
think if
bit.
there's anything here that is significant, it's that Todd drew Spider-Man, and while we're getting this recap of Spider-Man or of Spawn's origin, he's holding a spider, but also probably more so,
And he's a man. I see where you're going.
he's about to be bitten by the spider. No, but I think more so the point is Spawn's being drawn into a web right now all around him.
Yeah.
And this next page of Spawn where we actually see him holding the spider, fucking iconic.
So cool.
Such a kick-ass page.
Has any hero ever looked as cool sitting in trash?
That's like where he hangs out. And Spawn is definitely a millennial. Born in the 90s, lives in trash.
I love everything about this. I do really like the writing here where he's saying, like, oh, I've just been avoiding things.
Yeah.
And there's an editor's note that he hasn't seen Wanda since issue 3, which is cool, which is true.
And he's thinking to himself, I'm stalling. And then a voice from outside of his head says, you're not. You're acquiring knowledge, though you aren't aware of that. Which that sounds like how people always used to tell me I was a genius when I was a kid.
I'm overly focused on like this one thing. Yeah, that's because you're real smart.
Yeah.
I think my brain's a little bit broken. Years later, we started a Spawn podcast. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Where we get really into talking about the colors.
Yeah.
Where we hyper focus on one part of Spawn every week. Yeah, so here we get Cagliostro. I like this bit of narration, actually. I really like it a lot. Because he says, I'm not your concern. You torture yourself for answers that mostly you've already been given. Which is like, you've just called out your own comic a little bit, Todd, but also I kind of appreciate the acknowledgement that, like, we've had questions, we've had answers, we've had Spawn being like, what is this? And we've had people being like, it's a symbiote suit that you wear that's from hell, and it can do things that you make it do. And the next issue, he'll just be like, I guess it's some kind of symbiote or something.
It is also, I think...
Again, he's a millennial, confirmed.
I think it's also Todd being a little frustrated with the fans who are just like, well, what about this? And what about this?
That's
and what
fair.
about this? And he's like, just read the comic. Like,
it's
I
in
don't
there.
I don't need to answer this outside of that.
This issue seems to be just laying out everything we've learned so far about Spawn to Spawn and to the reader and putting it all in context together, which feels like saying this is the next chapter of Spawn.
Yeah. It's a new status quo. We're moving forward. It makes sense because we just had like a milestone issue, right?
Right.
25 usually considered a bit of a milestone for any book to get to, especially these days. So
even in the 90s, for an independent comic, Spawn was doing great by getting to 25, especially an Image book at this time. We've harped on it before. Not many Image comics getting to 25 in their first 2 years.
Yeah. So Cagliostro's showing up. He's giving us the rundown again. He's sort of laying it all out for Spawn. We're going to turn the page.
There's hell, there's heaven, and they're fighting over Earth, and what's going to happen for Earth is Armageddon.
And it's bad either way. It doesn't matter. Whoever wins, we
Earth
lose.
Loses. Yeah. Exactly.
We turn the page. We get another crazy Malbolgia. I love it. He's petting like a little frog guy.
Yeah.
It's sick.
Again, iconic rendering of Malbolgia. There are a lot of pages in this issue that are just so recognizable to Spawn fans as art that was used to market these characters everywhere. I call that out a lot when I see art in these pages. It's like, oh, that was taken out of this comic and used everywhere. And I think partially it's just because they recognize it, and also because that shows you sort of the already iconic nature of Spawn, that like the art in the comics is being used to promote the comic directly in other media and in toys and in magazines, and you're seeing it everywhere. The same way that you see Spider-Man and Batman and shit.
Yeah, that's going to lead us to another panel of Spawn brooding in the trash, but Cagliostro is now hanging out with him.
Sitting on a trash can.
I love the rats in the foreground.
Yeah.
Fighting over like a scrap of food. And this is just Cagliostro still laying it out, and Spawn being really angsty. Oh, I'm just a puppet. That's encouraging.
Yeah.
Things were so simple when I was alive. Which, like, no, they weren't. You were a world famous government assassin. That doesn't seem simple at all.
Yeah, he says things were so simple when I was alive. I followed orders, killed who the government told me, and collected a steady paycheck. A day's work for a day's living.
Or a day's killing.
Wow. Comrade Spawn, either way. Tanky Spawn, I guess. One thing on this page that I want to point out is we learned that Spawn could have gotten a better deal out of Malebolgia, but he had never been dead before, so he didn't know the rules.
Which also implies that people have been dead multiple times.
We'll learn they probably have as this comic goes on.
We will learn that. We'll get to the Jim. We'll get to the Jim Downing era one day.
Yeah, and so as they're hanging out, Freddy, the guy from earlier, Fred Barnett, is brought over in the alley by a guy who Spawn's never met. For some reason, it's not like one of the night people that Spawn knows. It's some other guy. And he says, well, we've never met, but I hang out around here, and this is Fred Barnett. I thought maybe you could help him, because Spawn is getting a reputation as a person who helps people. Sadly for Fred Barnett, Spawn's going to turn him away.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's kind of insinuated here is that, like, because he can make anything, that he could just make money. And Spawn's like, if I could just make money, why would I make money for myself and not live in an alleyway? Like,
now, could Spawn make money? We haven't learned he can't, I don't think.
He's made a plywood facsimile of himself, if we're going to go with that no prize explanation.
I mean, that's what is money, but that smaller.
And then he made sweet berry wine.
Berry wine, which will come up again in this issue.
Yeah, but he's also at this point where he doesn't really like being relied upon.
Yeah, he's trying to figure out his own shit.
I actually think it is a deft bit of writing from Todd here, because he does feel like he's being taken advantage of by Malebolgia already. Right. He does feel like he's kind of getting like some weird raw end of the deal by Cagliostro.
Cagliostro is explaining how much everybody wants from him.
Yeah, and he's just like, fuck this. Like, and so I think that as much as he had said, like, I got to defend my turf, I got to do my thing, blah, 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 he just doesn't want to be as put upon.
Yeah.
As some of the night people maybe want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he turns Fred away.
And it's very sad. He basically he says, please, sir, I don't have anywhere else to go. No one wants to help. They all say their hands are tied. And he's like, are you guys nuts? I can't help you. The guy's like, Eric is like, sorry, Fred. I thought he was someone who gave a damn. And Fred just says, what will I do now? And that's going to be just, again, very tragic foreshadowing of what's happening here. We've had apathetic Spawn. This is our second issue now. Spawn being like, don't want to give a shit.
Yeah. We're going to turn the page. We're going to another rendering of Malebolgia.
Another big hand focus.
Sick.
Yeah.
That one might be a Todd one.
It might be. He's holding something in his hand. Some kind of guts or something.
I thought it was a heart.
Oh, yeah, it probably is. Todd McFarlane definitely doesn't know how to draw hearts, so maybe it is a Todd page. Every time we see Malebolgia throughout this issue, he's explaining something about the Hellspawn, what they do, where they go, how they feel when they're there. Some Hellspawn willingly dive into the quest to feed Malebolgia's armies and burn through their powers and become his general. Some of them hide themselves away and only return when they've eventually whittled their power down to zero. Some of them despair and waste all their power and return to him right away. And Spawn is trying to figure out kind of for himself what kind of person he's going to be as Malebolgia's laying this out, that's exactly where Spawn is at the crossroads, kind of in his journey.
And this next page, after the Malbolgia page, is definitely a Capullo page.
Yeah.
100% a Capullo page. That's how he draws Spawn. Even Cagliostro now has like a few less lines on his face.
Yeah, his nose is very that close up on his face is
Yeah.
very Capullo. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the skulls on his cape. You're right.
Yeah. So Cagliostro just kind of says like, you know, things are not always as they seem. It's the opening that we did for the episode.
Yeah. Your next encounter is just a few seconds away.
And then Spawn gets kind of blipped away in a glowing prismatic plume.
I love that panel because I really love how the alley wall and the trash wrap around into kind of a spiral shape leading to that plume.
Yeah, it's really
a cool kind of like golden ratio sort of layout. It just is a really nice visual effect. Anyway, the next page is a big close-up on Al Simmons' face, and I kind of love it. Yes, that is a McFarlane face.
Super cool. I've said it before. I love Shoelace face, Al. I think it just brings such a dynamic to his face.
It's a very expressive face, and his eyes have like a very Looney Tunes quality.
Totally.
And I love the teeth in this one.
We never see the whites of his eyes.
No, or the yellows in this case.
Yeah. So
he's that shocked.
Yeah.
And the reason he's surprised is because he's been teleported to a little interdimensional pocket of heaven that exists somewhere between the moon and New York City.
It's in a different time continuum, as we are told. So a big thing about this is Neil Gaiman wrote some pages in this issue. To hear Neil Gaiman talk about it, there were some pages that were never used from his original script for issue number 9. Todd took those pages and wrote a whole issue around them. The overwhelming consensus is that it's these pages.
Which makes sense because they explain what happened to Spawn after he touched Angela's lance. And there's also a continuity little bit here where Spawn is meeting Gabrielle,
yeah.
The boss angel lady, the boss bitch angel.
The girl, all boss bitches.
The girl boss angel who is in charge of the office of heaven that's in New York. They have offices, corporate offices. It's very weird. We got into it a lot in the Grant Morrison issues. Very fun. Yeah. And she's explaining to Spawn that Angela tried to kill him with her lance, which would have rendered him asunder and ripped him from reality, but he somehow managed to come back. She says, you must have very powerful friends, because we're all very impressed. What she's interested in, though, is the lance, which was left behind by Angela when Spawn touched it. When he came back, he says it's gone. And she says that's going to make big trouble for Angela, presumably because she's not supposed to lose her weapons. The thing I was talking about that's a continuity thing is she pours him a glass of wine, and he says, I haven't had wine since I came back. But we know he previously conjured a whole crate of strawberry ripple wine, which will be being drunk in the alley when they return, which is part of that same Angela story.
Maybe it's just, or I'll no prize it, Spawn lies about drinking.
Yeah.
Just always lies about it.
Or maybe he hadn't had wine and just beer so far. I don't know.
Maybe he doesn't count MD 2020.
That's right. Mad Dog, Kiwi Mad Dog 2020. I think that really grounds exactly where these pages probably came from.
Yeah.
So.
100%. I do love scowling Spawn with a butterfly on his head.
Yes, that's very fun.
All-time great panel.
Yep.
It is also referenced on the cover.
Spawn also chugs that fucking wine. She pours him a glass and he just hurls it back. That's like how I used to drink when I used to go. I don't drink anymore. But there was a long time where I was really into it. And when I got married many years ago at this point, 15 years ago at this point, I went on these wine tastings with my father-in-law to find wine for the wedding because he's like a big wine guy. We got married in Northern California. I went with him and we went to like 5 wine tastings and I was just drinking every glass. And he was like spitting and stuff because he was driving and everything. By the final one, I was like, it's great. Wow, this is great strawberry ripple wine, Mr. Spawn, that you've served us here. That's to be good at my wedding. And that is how Spawn is drinking in this panel because he hasn't had any yet since he came back. And I have to be honest with you. If I was already dead, you couldn't stop me from like, I'd be doing it all.
Yeah, I mean, as far as we know,
I'd be sleeping in trash too because I'd be gacked out on stag.
we do know he can get drunk.
Yeah.
So we know that drugs have an effect on him.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'd be
they can't kill
hotboxing
him?
that fucking symbiote, dude. I'd be like, I'd be laying in trash because I was gacked out on skag. So she's only interested in what happened with Angela's lance. And he tells her that it's lost. And she's like, great to hear it. Glad to hear it. That's going to really fuck her over. Welcome back to Earth. And he reappears right in front of Cogliostro in the alley. And he's like, Jesus, what the hell? And Cogliostro says, heaven, actually.
Pretty good.
Yeah. Though not the one you or I were taught about. And he explains they keep small pieces of it in different time continuums. Whatever that means.
The most Neil Gaiman shit.
Yeah. So Spawn says, how do you know all this? Are you some kind of god? Cogliostro says, not very likely. I'm just a man, much like you. I've been through a few wars, too. Though I thought I was a big shot, could beat anyone, I was wrong. They won, not completely, but enough to neutralize my efforts. We don't really know a whole lot about what that means. Spawn asks him about the angels. We learn that there will be an Angela series coming up.
We will cover that.
Yeah, we will cover that. And Cogliostro reinforces that the angels need him too.
We get another Malbolgia page. I kind of like these pages being used to speed us through some backstory.
Yeah. There is one point where it cuts back to Malbolgia's monologue and it goes, the monologue continues. And I was just like, yes, it does.
Which sometimes I think that those are things that like they feel like placeholders, you know?
Yeah.
Like Todd was like, I don't know what the rest. All right, the monologue continues. Now I write the next page, but then he like wrote it, but he didn't delete the first part. Or like Tom Warzikowski got it and was like, all right, the monologue continues.
Because it seems right. It sure does. And here we see that Malbolgia is laughing. He's cackling even. He's cackling about power.
This is why I think that it was a heart in his hand.
Yeah, and he's crushing it.
Yeah, it's like exploding in blood.
You kind of get the impression later of what Malbolgia is laughing at. The deep irony that he seems to be inflicting on Spawn. And we see here Spawn's now drinking wine again. They're asking him, is that ripple a little bit powerful for you?
Power meter is back, so we know that he conjured the wine.
He did. And we saw that in the first Cogliostro Angela issue. The funny thing about that is that Gabriel was eating strawberries too.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a connection they were meant to draw or what. But Spawn explains a little bit of what happened in the Violator miniseries where he lent Violator a portion of his power so he could go deal with these mob bosses, and then Violator actually returned it.
Yeah, very based Violator move.
Yeah.
Also, I do love, I'm finally out of my mood swing as a line. This is where the characterization of Al Simmons, he's just kind of whatever Todd needs him to be in the moment. Usually that's asking questions of other characters so that we can move the plot forward. But like here, where he's like, I want him to be a wild and crazy guy.
Yeah, he's drunk Spawn. He's wine drunk Spawn specifically, where he's like burping and belching while he's telling a story about the Violator to the Night People. And then he goes, but not before he gave my power back, but not before he laid a good shellac into my head. Ha ha ha. Am I awesome or what? Which, like,
okay.
Al Simmons is an annoying drunk. He's a dude you do not want to hang out with.
I mean, he was annoying when he was alive and sober because he was a
government assassin. Now he's dead and drunk, and he's still an annoying jerk. Because Eric shows back up. Nobody's laughing at what Spawn thinks is a hilarious story. Eric shows back up. And Spawn says, why is no one laughing? Eric says, you could have helped him. You could have done something. And Spawn says, I'm not going to help that blue-faced piece of talking about the Violator clown. And Eric says, not him. I'm talking about my friend Fred. Spawn says, who the hell is Fred? Which shows exactly how much that moment meant to him earlier. And the guy says, you don't remember? Here, maybe this will refresh your memory. Oh yeah, this is 2 days later, by the way. We established that earlier. It's important for the timeline that this is 2 days after Spawn first met Fred.
That's the fastest that Todd has ever shown us a passage of time.
Right? And God, he throws a newspaper at Spawn that reveals that Fred has taken his own life.
Yeah.
And out of desperation because no one would help him. And Spawn is just devastated by this. And the night people are kind of sick of him at this point. They have turned on him here. They say, how do you feel now, hero? And they say, forget it. Never mind. He was from the outside. He didn't count. And Spawn shrinks away. And one of them says, that's it. Run away, you loser.
I do like the dynamic that Todd's established between the night people in the alley and Spawn.
Mhm.
Like, I like that they're not afraid of him. And I like that they are characters to kind of call him on his bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, we transition right into a page of Malbolgia laughing because this is exactly what Malbolgia wants.
He's manipulating Spawn.
Yeah, to push him towards some sort of path, to put him into this unwinnable situation, right?
And we're left with the question of whether Malbolgia manipulated those events or if he's simply laughing his ass off at the horrifically tragic irony of what's befallen Spawn's friends. And the final page of the issue is Spawn lurking away. It's a really cool page of him wrapped up in the cloak, looking very vampiric and dark. And it says, lost in the most obscure shadows of a decaying city, walks a dead man. Tonight, for the first time since his return, he feels dead. And
very
I gotta
Stan
say,
Lee,
yeah,
very and given the setting, very Spider-Man No More,
yeah, very
right?
It's
It's almost the same shot.
walking down the alley. If only his costume was laying in a bucket.
Yeah.
I'm conflicted about this ending. I'm going to be real because it's a sensitive topic to me. I don't know how I feel about how it's handled here. I don't think it's meant to be taken lightly at all.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's not given as much gravitas in the story as you might like. I don't know. But at the same time, as a parable, it kind of works. I think if there wasn't an 8-page or whatever, 5-page sequence stuck in the middle of this that wasn't that story, like if we had gotten another chapter on the through line, another check-in with Fred or something, it might have had more impact. It feels sad to me in a way that I think goes beyond what the comic intends, maybe a little bit, to have reduced Fred to a plot point through his suicide.
So the issue that I think would have laid a decent framework for this one is Alan Moore's issue 8 in Heaven, because I think I would have been fine with hanging out with Fred for most of this issue.
Right.
Learning more about his life, learning more about his situation. Why is he so poor?
Right.
What is his job?
Right.
How is he trying to fix that? Make me really care about this character.
Give him a little more humanity before we take it all away.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there's not enough space in this book to do that.
Right.
It's not that Todd's not interested in it. I just don't think that he thinks about these things very three-dimensionally.
Right.
There's a letter in the letters column in one of these 2 issues where somebody thanks him for making like a cool black superhero.
Mm-hmm.
And he straight out says, like, I wasn't even really thinking about the character's race. Like I wasn't trying to make that necessarily an important part of the character. It's just a fact of the character.
Right.
And so I don't think that Todd really thinks about these things
Right. We've
on a
discussed that
deeper
before,
level, you know.
where it's aesthetic or like he has a poetic idea to it that it's an idea or an archetype writ large that he thinks fits with the story he's trying to tell. I don't think this is like a problematic bad issue or bad
No.
ending or
I
anything.
actually think it's a pretty good issue. I said to you before we started that I think these are two of my favorite issues
So
of the
far,
whole
yeah.
run.
I mean, especially considering the number of issues that have felt like, okay, we're just doing this again. And especially considering how much of this is just reiterating, like laying everything out. I think it does a good job of that. And I think punctuating it with an event, as we're seeing through this whole issue and even in the previous one, Spawn is trying to figure out what path he's going to take, where he actually fits in this whole conflict he's been thrust into, all these things. I think ending this issue with an incident that incites him to have to take one of those paths isn't a bad thing.
Right.
I think
It
it's
maybe
just,
could have been less drastic, I think.
or given more weight in the story. Like, I think the thing that just makes me feel bad about it is that Fred Barnett was barely a character in the story. He's just there to die for Spawn's ego.
This is also the Chris Claremont school of writing characters, though.
Right.
You get to see them for 3 pages. They get a first name and a last name. And as soon as they get those, you know they're going to die.
Right.
It happens in X-Men comics forever. I mean, that's like, and the narration is always like, and Jim McLaughlin didn't know that this would be the worst day of his life. You know what I mean? Like,
I hope he's
that's,
having great days. Just want to say, if we're doing the borrowing names thing,
yeah,
hope
but
he's
like,
doing great.
but like, it is just this, it is a trope. And I do think that Todd treats it that way. I
Right.
do think that these 2 issues are better written than, I would hate to see this issue as like issue 6.
Yeah, it would have been a lot rougher if it was earlier on in the series.
Because
Todd is definitely coming more into what he wants to do with this comic.
yeah, and even as much as we talked about issue 5, and I said, oh, it's like highlight of the series, kind of, because it's the sort of Spawn that I recognize. It is still pretty heavy-handed, and like there's parts of it that aren't great.
Right.
There's a lot more nuance in these 2 issues.
Mhm.
Granted, I guess part of it is because it's a Neil Gaiman script, and but I do think it shows Todd's progression. I do think that it shows some growth. Fred Barnett's a tough one. I mean, it's also crazy. It's an insane villain origin story.
Right.
Like that's the guy. Like you have Malbolgia bring him back,
Yeah.
and because like Spawn is like not doing whatever Malbolgia. I don't know. But like
Yeah.
it's a crazy villain origin story, if
Yeah.
nothing else.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think it treats the weight of the situation as more than something for shock value.
Yeah. A trope.
And
It's meant to break your heart and nothing, and hope you don't look too much deeper.
and in a weird way, I think it's effective
Oh,
though.
it is. It's heartbreaking.
And I think that that's more than people thought they were getting out of this book, especially
Yeah.
at the time,
Yeah.
and especially after the last issue, right? We were
Yeah.
just like, "Yo, Tremor, he's cool, fucking punches shit, cybernetic arm, big demon guy, awesome." You read this and you're like, kind of nothing happens, quote unquote,
Right.
right?
It's not like the Tremor issue where it's a big fight.
Right. There's no fight in this, really, except with his own feelings.
Yeah.
It's a feelings issue.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's those
Fred
two
Barnett,
sides of Spawn that we talked about.
Yeah.
There's the side where it's this kind of ultimately fairly breezy, fun superhero comic with these weird powers and like kind of very stylized, creepy villains. And then the other side is this deep mythology about heaven and hell and morality and evil and good and being caught in between those things and having people trying to force you into both of them and having to choose your own path. it shows you really the two sides of Spawn and even the two sides of Todd McFarlane as a creator, where he wants this like heavy, weighty kind of philosophical. He's capable of it. And then he also is capable of putting out an issue where it's just Spawn fighting a guy and it's really cool.
Yeah. I think that's part of the reason that we're digging into it at all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is because it's inconsistent in what it's going to deliver to you.
And I think it will probably even out, like, on some level as time goes on and it becomes more of just telling the story of Spawn. But I think it's interesting, especially starting from the beginning and seeing the apparatus being built, that you see Todd McFarlane's skills as a writer develop and change and become more honed, if nothing else.
We're also about to get into the era of him stopping drawing.
Yeah. We're about to get into more Greg Capullo.
Yeah, we're moving towards Greg Capullo really taking over the book on the art side. Todd will still ink it, but Capullo is going to inform, aside from, the first 30 issues or so, I would say that Todd's artistic imprint on the character is limited.
It's in some ways, it's a little bit like Rob Liefeld and Deadpool, where he created the character, but it was later really defined visually by other people. I don't know, maybe that's not a good comparison.
I think that's not a good comparison because, as we've called out a bunch of times, McFarlane art gets used for advertising and whatever for
it's not a great comparison.
Spawn for a while. But you are right in that there's definitely huge sections of fans that when they think of Spawn, think of Greg Capullo's Spawn.
Right.
Because he drew like
most of the
50 issues of it,
right,
which
huge,
at this point is almost half of it.
Yeah.
Which
to one thing that I'm very excited about as we get into the Capullo era is to see that progression, because you don't see a lot of artistic runs in particular that long. And of course there'll be other artists in there as well, but like, you didn't have John Byrne on that many issues of X-Men. You had Chris Claremont on that many issues of X-Men.
Right.
It's just an interesting point in history for comics where that was still very possible, and especially in a niche where someone like Greg Capullo seems to be pretty happy finding a character he enjoys drawing and digging into it for a long time, as long as he's making that money and having a good time. It's going to be interesting to see him do that with Spawn and make that his home for a really long time, much like we're seeing Todd McFarlane evolve and grow into writing Spawn.
Capullo has a similar arc professionally to the Image guys, right? He's not an OG Image guy, obviously.
No.
But he was a Marvel guy.
Mm-hmm.
Drew a ton of X-Force.
Yep.
Also drew Quasar.
Yep.
Which
including
has
a
one
great
of
cover.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mama never said there'd be days like this.
Listeners, that is, if you never read 90s Quasar, that is where Quasar is pregnant.
Yeah.
The male Quasar is pregnant on the cover. And it's very funny. It's a very, it's a great cover. I think Greg Capullo's great. I kind of love everything that he's ever done. I'm in the bag for him. And I'm excited to explore this era because it's the one I'm least familiar with from his career. It was almost like I was a kid, there was Greg Capullo art. Then there was a lot of time with no Greg Capullo art. And then I was an adult and he was the artist on Batman. Like, it was like that.
Right.
So, and he'll soon be the artist on Wolverine. So,
yeah,
pretty excited for that as well.
Yeah,
and
cool.
It's exciting to see his style evolve. He's a super nice guy. I've interviewed him a couple times.
Oh yeah, one of the nicest guys in the world. I don't think anybody in comics I've ever heard say a bad word about him. Just
no. And so I'm just really excited, and we're definitely going to reach out to him and hope that he'll talk to us about some of this stuff because
Yeah,
I'm
maybe that'd be great.
especially an issue like this. I'm excited to figure out the art breakdown. Like, what did you do? What didn't you do? I know that one page is a Capullo page.
It has to be. It has to
It
be.
can't not be. But besides that, I think a couple of the Malbolgia ones are. I think some of them aren't. And then it feels like maybe he just did like finishes on
Yeah.
layouts. I don't know. But this is the stuff we're trying to demystify
Yeah.
about this run, this legendary run. I mean, that's really
Yeah.
what it comes down to. And I don't
Yeah.
need to harp on that too much. Obviously, if you're listening, you're already a Spawn fan. We're not trying to convince you of anything. We're now a good 3 months into this podcast at this
Yeah.
point, and so thanks for sticking around with
Yeah,
us for this long.
absolutely. Our millions
But
of
this is
listeners all around the globe.
this is what keeps us excited about it, and I hope that we're not too annoying. But if we are too annoying, you can
Don't let us know. No.
No, you should let us know. And in classic Todd fashion, we'll push back, which is what it's all about.
Yeah.
The letters columns on these are nothing too crazy, I don't really think.
Right.
I think the first woman who is not a jilted wife, who's actually a Spawn reader, has written in, who's an 18-year-old Spawn fan who got introduced to Image Comics from her boyfriend.
All right. Hell yeah.
She has a letter, and she thinks that the skipping of issues 19 and 20 is interesting. So Todd is a fan of that. Even the blah, blah, blah from Terry Fitzgerald, there's nothing like super crazy. It's the end of the year when these issues come out. So he does like a big thank you for a great year for Todd's toy. Oh, still Todd's toys at this point. It's not McFarlane toys yet.
Right.
And there's a
That is
lot of
gonna
ads.
be starting to add up soon. The Todd McFarlane toy situation, especially
Yeah.
with more Angela coming down the pike. But we'll get into that later on down the road. And we've already gotten into it plenty. So, final thoughts. Oh, go ahead, Perry.
There is a pretty funny letter that is like, oh, this is probably going to sound pretty lame. This is my first time writing a comic book. I'm 21 years old, been enjoying comics for many years. That's the mandatory fanboy stuff. I love Spawn. I'd also like to know why the devil said caca happens instead of shit happens. Shit was used in Spawn Batman. Why not in Spawn? One more thing. What exactly happened between Spawn and Angela when they were fighting and they were in Spawn's cape? I was a little confused. He goes on talking about toys. He asks for a Cerebus like Spawn double pack, which actually is kind of cool.
Yeah.
At the time, like, yeah, I could see wanting that, especially if it was like packaged like the cover of issue 10. I think
Right.
that'd be kind of sick. And he says, I don't really care whether you're suffering from paralagia or not, Peter David. Who's he? All I know is because of you and the rest of Image, I'm enjoying comics more than ever. I'm looking forward to Image X month and a Silvestri Spawn and a McFarlane Cyberforce. So that's what it's called, Image X month. Todd replies, you've asked a lot of questions. Let's see if I can answer them in reverse order. 1, Peter David is fat and balding. So what's the point? Next question.
Wow.
There's some stuff about defective toy, blah blah blah. 4, I'll eventually I'll eventually get around to fully explaining how the costume breathes and acts. For now, just be patient. As for the non-cussing issue, both of those books were written by different people, and each writer chooses his or her own limits. And I choose not to edit one writer differently than another, so I just decided to keep in the word that was particular to that writer.
Sure.
So we have reasoning now for why curses happen or don't happen in Spawn.
Why caca happens, little
Todd,
buddy.
as a kind, polite Canadian,
Yeah.
doesn't curse, but Frank Miller does.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Final thoughts on these 2 issues?
Well, that was Alan Moore. Caca happens was Alan Moore. So.
Well, right, but also he knows that he's playing in like Todd's
fair
world.
He was writing it in a Canadian dialect.
I mean, so wait, well, we he wrote it Canadianly.
He wrote it very Canadianly.
Well, and also we talked about it a little bit off mic, but Alan Moore drew thumbnails. He didn't write a script. Alan Moore famously he writes very long scripts because he describes many things. He gives lots of background information. And for his Image work, specifically for Spawn, he would draw thumbnails of all of his pages, and with minimal dialogue, essentially. So, and he said that Todd followed his thumbnails like to the T for Spawn number 8.
Todd's a professional. He's not going to showboat on shit like that. He's like, this is what he did. This is what he wrote. This is what I'm going to do.
It's also faster to not have a fucking argument about it. So.
That's true. It's also faster to just be like, great, I'm doing it. But that does make you wonder how much of the like character designs and stuff were actually Alan Moore. Anyway.
Well, that does mean that Alan Moore has at least once drawn the 5 famous Fleabag brothers.
That's true.
Because he created them. So if they show up in the new Spawn movie...
Fleabag brothers. I was trying to explain that to someone the other day, and she was like, are they actually... Should I have actually heard of... Should I know what the Fleabag brothers are? And I was like, they're not really famous. Not unless you've read Spawn.
So they're not famous.
They're infamous. So, okay. So final thoughts on these 2 issues, Pierce, as we wrap this up.
These were a great time.
Yep.
Great time at the comics.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've harped on it a lot, but you get to see all of what Spawn is in these 2 issues. And hopefully you like both of them because you're going to get a lot of both sides going forward, I think.
I definitely would recommend, if I had a friend who like had never read Spawn and was like, what should I read?
25 and 26 are
I'd be like,
place to start.
This gives you a pretty basis for everything. So
yeah. And then if you want to go back and read the other parts, and if you don't, you actually don't have to.
Yeah, that is the thing. These do, you really don't have to.
But you might want to because they're good. They're fun to read. I mean, a lot of them are great. As we've done, we didn't skip ahead to 25 and 26. So
that's true. We didn't start the podcast here. Next up, we're going to get into the Curse. So that's going to be Spawn 27 and 28. And then Angela's Hunt, the Angela miniseries, before heading into Spawn Across America. So that's what you have to look forward to, Hellspawn. George, where can people find you if you want them to find you?
Oh, you can read my writing every rootin' tootin' day over at newsarama.com. And you can find me on social media sometimes, probably Blue Sky, I guess, Instagram maybe. It's always at Crypt Trash. And you can hear my music as well. I did the theme song for this episode. And you can also check out my band, Hypersleep, which is hypersleep.bandcamp.com. And you can check out my personal project, Witch Crisis, on YouTube.
Hell yeah.
What about you, Pierce?
I've been Pierce Leiden, and you can find me most places at PE Lightning, some places at lapsed.punk. You can find Spawnography at Spawnography Pod or at Spawnography, depending on what social media you use. The only one we're not on is Facebook because I'm not 80 years old. You can also check out my band. We did not do the music for this. We probably should, actually. That'll be fun. We'll do that one day. Well, I'll just record like a little cover of the intro music. I'll get Raj to do it at home one day. But you can follow my band. We're called Power Trash at powertrash.mp3 on Instagram, and you can find us on Spotify and Bandcamp. Power Trash is the name. Google it, you'll find it. Thank you to me for editing. Thank you to George for the theme song. Thank you to Todd for Spawn.
That's right.
Thank you to Blake Whitlow for the Spawn reading order. If you're looking for a way to engage with Spawn and you don't know what you're supposed to read, what's essential, what's non-essential, we are going by Blake's reading order. It's really great. It's a Google Doc. If you Google Spawn reading order, you'll find it. Really great resource. I invite you to come hang out with us on the Reddits, Spawniverse and r/Spawn, and also the Facebook groups. You'll see me posting about stuff, so you can find it pretty easily.
Well, Pierce, for Todd so loved the world,
he gave his only begotten Spawn.
Spawniverse!